In 2015, archaeologists made a shocking discovery, though it wouldn't be clear how shocking it was until very recently. This is Thorin. He's named after a dwarf from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, and one of the reasons he has this name is that he is now believed to be one of the last Neanderthals to walk our planet. There's even been a whole TV documentary about him recently, and a lot of the information coming out about him is fascinating, but some of it is also a little sad and, to be honest, a little disturbing. I've been diving into the different news articles and research available on Thorin lately, and I think there's a lot to look at here. But first, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Marie, and thank you for joining me too for this first ever new and improved episode of Lost Bits. This is the first ever episode of Lost Bits just on its own. We're just using this now as a place to dive into the coolest, weirdest historical stories I can find. So freaking pumped. Okay, let's do it. Let's dive into the bit. So Thorin, like I said, was only uncovered in 2015 at a place known as Mandarin Cave in France. Now this cave and cave system really has also revealed a bunch of other finds, and not just Neanderthals. Homo sapiens also lived in this cave too, but just at different times. But of course it's going to be our Neanderthal friends that's our focus today. One of the first things that's so remarkable about Thorin is, after dating what we have of him, which I'll dive into that more in a second, researchers feel that it's most likely he lived around 42,000 years ago. Now, this is absolutely staggering because Neanderthals as a whole are believed to have sort of died off around only 40,000 years ago. And while we found fossilized sediments like from charcoal at places like Gibraltar that date to even younger, like around 38,000 years ago, Thorin's date makes him the newest actual human remains we've found of a Neanderthal. He and his family would have been living at the very edge of their history, at the very end of their timeline, and also kind of at the start of our independent one. That makes anything we can learn about Thorin and how he lived his life incredibly valuable. And I do want to stop here and go back to that thing of what we've recovered of Thorin so far. Well, because his fossils are so valuable, archaeologists are really taking their time and being super extra careful and physically removing his remains from the cave they found him in. So even though the discovery was made in 2015, as of right now, when I record this at the end of December of 2024, not all of Thorin has been removed from the cave yet. The recent DNA analysis they've done on him has been taken from molars and portions of his skull that have been recovered. But this is still an active investigation and excavation, and it's not the only one like it actually in the world. In Gorham's Cave Complex in Gibraltar, yearly excavations have been going on now for a very long time, uncovering evidence of an isolated pocket of Neanderthal people that managed to survive to an incredibly recent date there. It's from this place that they found that charcoal sediment that I mentioned to you that could date to 38,000 or newer. And this site, the Gorham Cave Complex, has been on the UNESCO World Heritage List now since 2016 as a result. This place is incredibly important and very similar to Thorin's cave in France in a lot of ways. And actually, something that we're learning from all of these sites is that near the end, especially, Neanderthals seem to have been living in isolated pockets across Europe. And here we come to the more disturbing reason that Thorin has been in the news. Because in his remains, we found evidence of both the extremeness of this isolation and some of its more unfortunate side effects. And that's because modern analysis would reveal that Thorin and his whole family, even by Neanderthal standards, had been living an incredibly isolated existence for an extremely long time. Now this is interesting because archaeologists noted that around a 10 days walk from where Thorin and his family were living in Mandarin Cave back in France now, there were other Neanderthal communities. Despite this fact, after analyzing Thorin's bloodline, they found that there was absolutely no outside genes introduced from anyone coming outside of Thorin's own little community in this cave for at least 50,000 years. That's almost mind-boggling. I need to stop and just sit with that. The Mandarin Cave complex is not a huge complex. Literally, the head researcher that analyzed these remains put it very, very bluntly, quote, the population of Thorin had spent 50 millennia without exchanging a single gene with the classical Neanderthal populations, end quote. Now this is almost unthinkable. This is not just a temporary bottleneck of the population. These are people choosing for 50,000 years to not intermingle, not just with Homo sapiens that may be coming into the territory, but with their own people, with Neanderthals, for 50,000 years. One of these same researchers that was studying Thorin pointed out that this gap of 50,000 years is basically the time it takes from a wolf to become the chihuahua that some people carry around with them. That's how long Thorin and company were in genetic isolation. Why? What could possibly lead to them requiring that kind of isolation for themselves to feel safe? And as you can probably imagine, Thorin has huge evidence of inbreeding because of this isolation. And frankly, Thorin and his family aren't the only ones. Recent research has found inbreeding across all these small isolated communities of Neanderthals to the point that they actually now believe it may have been a contributing factor in what led Neanderthals to go extinct. You need a certain amount of genetic diversity to have genetic adaptability. Now a lot of archaeologists talk about the extinction of Neanderthals more along the lines of slow dying off as opposed to some sort of big extinction event. And their decline may have been caused by a bunch of factors. Inbreeding probably, but also climatic changes. It was getting much colder than they were used to around the time that they start dying off. Humans were coming onto the scene, and even though the idea of us wiping them out through warfare isn't really accepted anymore, the idea that we may have just sort of outpopulated and outbred the Neanderthals is definitely one that gets talked about a lot recently. And I mean, the purpose of this episode was never to end on a definitive factor on what caused Thorin and his family to die out. Not even really why I wanted to talk about it. And instead, the reason I wanted to talk about Thorin and his family is just how striking a picture that he leaves us of his time. Because Thorin isn't obviously just some sort of artifact. Thorin was a man. He was a man that lived in France around 42,000 years ago. He had parents for sure. He might have had a wife and kids or something. And he was a man that was living in a changing world. A world that was getting colder, a world with strange new faces that would have been around. It was also a world where there would have been less and less people like him. And I hope when I'm talking about inbreeding among Neanderthals, I don't give the impression of them being just these sort of barbaric cave people either, because we now know that Neanderthals were smart, they were capable of art and tool making and all this other amazing stuff. Like, the feeling that Thorin gives me and his family gives me is just one of kind of sadness and loneliness. I mean, I know you can't end up isolated for 50,000 years without that being kind of a choice, but still, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to be Thorin, to be standing there at the entrance of that cave one day and just looking out and I don't know, it's just being a different world. Like, I described him somewhat dramatically earlier at being at the edge of history, and he really, really was. He was at the edge of their history, and I'm not sure how aware of that he was. I'm not sure how much of that he knew. But I don't know. Rest in peace, Thorin. Lots of love, my friend. And like I said, they are treating him and his remains with excellent care now. And thanks to Thorin and his whole family there, we're probably going to learn a lot more about how they live their lives and about this important time period. It also does make me wonder, there's so many different stories in human mythology of like cave people or of little people that live in crevices and caves and forests and things. I know I'm not the first person to speculate as much, but I can't help thinking when I read articles like this of Europe, of people that, despite the stereotype, actually Neanderthals were a little bit smaller than us, than Homo sapiens. So you have sort of little people living in caves in ancient Europe, and I'm thinking of all like the stories of mythology from Europe. Well, you know, I guess Thorin he's kind of named after one of dwarves and things like that. You know, I'm not the first to wonder maybe if, I don't know, some of our mythology is just cultural memories of our ancient friends. I would like that kind of in a way, I think. I don't know. But what do you guys think? What do you think of Thorin and his crew? And I will post a full source list like always. You'll find it pinned. It's in a Google link on the top comment below. Let me know what you're thinking about all this, and I will. I'll keep you posted about any new news that I find about Thorin and his whole crew that comes up. And please, as always, don't let my words be the last words you hear on Thorin or Neanderthals. You know, your local library might have a cool book on Neanderthals. Yeah, it might have a cool book not on Neanderthals. Cool book on just, you know what? The library is just where the cool kids go. It's where the cool kids hang out. Wait, hang on, wait, whoa. You don't want people to think you're some sort of square, do you? Just go to the library. And when you're back from the library, I did want to let you know if you're one of those people who's nice enough to watch my main episodes on here on Lost Realms. Like I said in my well wishes and announcement video, I'm taking a little bit longer to make them now. I don't think I actually gave a time frame. So I'll let you know now, there's going to be a new Lost Realms episode every 3 weeks. The next one is going to be on Herxheim, and also a brief history of Neolithic cannibalism. You see, this is why I need the extra time. We're going to go deep, you guys. Like, okay, so Herxheim, if you don't know, is a very unique archaeological site that was discovered in the last few years. It's fascinating for a bunch of reasons, but one of the reasons is the signs of mass cannibalism that occurred there. Now, we're going to look at every single detail of Herxheim, but to understand it properly and to sort of get past the shock value, I really do. I think we need to look at all of what we know of Neolithic cannibalism and just explore the history of it in general. So that will be coming out around the middle of January. Keep an eye out for that if you are interested. But either way, again, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Be safe, be happy, go with all my love. Until next time, goodbye.